Hello, friends.
Hello. So yeah, I'm doing one of these weird questions for atheists videos. I don't normally like to do these, even though I think they're pretty popular because they're just usually really boring. But I like people with a certain I don't know what in their attitude. And this guy's got it. I like him. So I'm going to engage with this.
So with this video, I have some questions for atheists.
All right then, hopefully I can help you out.
Now, this is not a debate. I'm not really trying to refute you.
Well, no, but from what I've seen of it, I think you're hoping I'll have a really hard time of it.
Just some questions for you to consider. Some questions I had to consider when I was an atheist and an agnostic.
Oh, you were an atheist. Interesting. So in that case, I hope that you'll provide the answers that you came up with to these questions when you were an atheist. That'd make this video pretty interesting if you explained how you used to answer these questions and why you don't think those answers work anymore. But then again, this is like a 15-minute video, and I think you have somewhere in the area of 45 or so questions, so we might not have time for that. You know what? Better just stick with the questions.
And a lot of these questions help push me to the truth, which is Christianity is the truth.
Oh, so these are like tough questions. Questions you had such a hard time answering that you converted. Oh, well, no wonder you're not going to tell us the answers you had. You couldn't come up with any. You're getting me nervous. Wondering if I should just stop the video right here and now, pretend I never started. Delete the evidence. I wouldn't want to accidentally convert half my audience. My brother would never let me hear the end of it.
So,
well,
let's get started.
Yes, please. I do have all day, but I'd rather not spend it on this.
So,
do
you believe in the scientific impossibility that everything came out of nothing?
Scientific impossibility. Okay, what does that mean? Does it just mean it's inconceivable to me based on everything I understand about how the world works? Induction from my personal experience and the experience of probably everyone else? I mean, yeah, it seems exceptionally improbable to me, but to go that extra, 0.00000 and declare it not only wildly improbable, but in fact impossible, is just not something I'm typically prepared to do. I mean, impossibilities can apply within theories in science, right? Like, for example, it's impossible to travel faster than the speed of light. Within general relativity, that's true. Within the universe, I mean, a lot of very smart people kind of think so, but there is always room for doubt because you don't know what somebody's going to learn in the future. Now, when it comes to nothing, that's kind of a very broad term. It's a term that's actually kind of ambiguously defined. It's not completely clear just from everyday usage of the word what precisely it means. I mean, if you look over in the corner of the room and you say there's nothing, well, what does that mean? I mean, there's dust, there's air, there's space. Okay, well, take all that away, make there a complete vacuum and no space-time. Well, okay, what is there? Does 1 + 1 still equal 2? Are there laws of physics? People tend to treat these as things that God created, things that God authored. If there are laws, who wrote the law book? So apparently we're treating these as things, which I find dubious, but okay. Are they still there? Let's go even further. Is there the rule that something either exists or does not exist? It either is or is not. Was this rule also created by God? Before God created the rule, did he exist and not exist at the same time? What does existence even mean before rules that define what it means to exist? The point is, what is a thing? What is something? What is anything? Before we can talk about the scientific impossibility or possibility of anything coming from nothing, we have to establish what the thing in nothing even means. What is something? What is anything? What counts? What doesn't? Why? Are we just talking about matter and energy, or matter, energy, and space-time? Or are we talking about something even more fundamental to the nature of reality? In the absence of anything, do basic logical principles still apply? If so, why so? If not, why not? Are they things that can exist or not exist? Is it even possible for them to be not true? What does that mean? If there's nothing at all, can something even exist? Is there even something that could be described as the state of anything existing, which simply happens to be no? Or is even that absent? In which case nothing can exist because that means nothing. I mean, personally, I find all these questions tedious and pointless. I think it's a big, dumb, stupid rabbit hole that doesn't have much bearing on actual reality. It's pretty much a philosophical wankfest. But if you really want to talk about that question, that's the kind of stuff you're going to start talking about. And the other thing is, I don't quite understand the purpose of the question because it does not apply to any scientific theory that I'm aware of. There's no theory that's just, I don't know, everything popped out of literally nothing. The closest thing you have to that is the origin of something happening by mechanisms that aren't fully understood yet. Right? We're talking about physics here. We're not talking about woo-woo nonsense. If it's unknown how something happens, it's just unknown. That doesn't mean it was just poof, no reason, now there's something. Now, I will say, if the way we're talking about nothing is the very narrow, rigid way that Christian debaters tend to like to define it, which is sometimes put as what a rock dreams about, which doesn't just mean no matter or energy, but as they often bring up when they're arguing, logical incoherence, because God apparently wrote the laws of logic, and before then it just didn't apply. Couldn't apply. Same with mathematical describability, any sort of quantum activity, any form of reality whatsoever. For some reason, God apparently excluded, who existed just because, even though just because is apparently not good enough when you're talking about why the universe can be logically coherent, why there can be quantum vacuum fluctuations, or why anything exists at all. Apparently saying that's just the fundamental nature of reality, that's just the way things is not good enough then. But when it's God, it is. Sorry, I got sidetracked. If that's the kind of nothing we're talking about, from which everything came, which is quite different from the physical definition of nothing, then I would not be very likely to believe it. And of course, that's part of why I reject God and the creation of the universe by God, because that's creation ex nihilo. It's creation from nothing by God. Apparently without even any mechanism by which it occurred other than just saying something. And it just doesn't seem like something that's very believable. Again, I don't see how that would work. There's no mechanism proposed. There's nothing proposed. It's just, there's a God, and he can just create things out of nothing. He can just make things pop out of nothing. Well, I'm just not buying it, sorry. So, no, I don't declare it a scientific impossibility, I just don't believe it. And I will say, when it comes to the various different scientific explanations that have been put forth, I also don't believe those, even though they do put forth a mechanism. But the problem is, I personally just don't understand the math. And if you want to be real, I haven't even looked at the math, and I think it's probably just beyond me to even comprehend what's being talked about, at least at my current level of education on the subject. So believing it's true or believing it's false is not really something I'm interested in. If I wanted to decide whether I found it believable, I would learn the material and look at it in detail, but I don't care that much. It's just not that interesting of a question. Not to me. And also, it's such early stages in trying to figure out answers to questions like that. You know, what preceded the Big Bang, if anything? I don't see that anyone has a reliable answer right now. I'm not going to take the word of people who just make up an answer like, God done it, and there you go. Everything popped out of nothing when God said so. You know, that's just ludicrous. You're just saying things. But I'm also not just going to assume outright that any given proposal that's told to me by any particular scientist is correct either. I enjoy reading about these ideas, learning about these ideas, like on a casual basis. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go, aha, that's the one. I believe that one. Give it time. You know, maybe there will never be an answer that's as rock solid as answers to more mundane questions like evolution and so forth. Maybe there will be, though. I don't know. Whatever. I got a life to live. I'm not worried about it. I got other things to do.
Now, I've heard some atheists say no. Some atheists say yes.
I'm sure they do. To be honest, I don't even know what I said. It was a weird question.
And if you said no, you don't believe that, then that's good. You're close to being agnostic.
That's interesting. So your question was, do you believe in the scientific impossibility of everything coming out of nothing? And you say, if you say no, you're closer to being an agnostic than an atheist, right? That is, you're softening up. You're more open to God. I think that's what you're saying, which means that you aren't using the everything coming out of nothing thing as a caricature of science to say that that's the scientific opinion of how the universe originated. You recognize that that's the theistic version, creation ex nihilo. That's what it is. And if people don't believe it's impossible for that to happen, then they're closer to believing that God could have made it happen. You would be surprised how often religious people arguing for their religion and against science try to assign that belief to science, despite it being their own belief. But you're not, I don't think. So, good job.
That's good. Because how could anything come out of nothing? That makes no sense.
Oh, come on. Okay, let me go back and make sure that that's what you actually said. Hold on.
Do you believe in the scientific impossibility that everything came out of nothing? If you said no, you don't believe that, then that's good. You're close to being agnostic.
Yeah, that's what you said. If you do not believe in the scientific impossibility of something coming from nothing, that's good. You're closer to being an agnostic, i.e. that person is closer to your belief than they otherwise might be. And then immediately after saying that, you turn around and say that it makes no sense for something to come from nothing. Okay, then why do you believe in God? God created all matter and energy out of nothing. Everything from literally nothing. I don't remember the last time I saw such a fast 180.
How could anything come out of nothing? That makes no sense. That's magic. And I don't do magic. I do miracles.
You do miracles? Yeah, prove it. But anyway, as far as God doing miracles, supposedly God creates everything out of nothing. But that makes no sense because that's magic. It ain't miracles, it's magic. And if it's magic, it's stupid. So where are we going with this? What was the plan here? So I think that about answers question 1. This is going to take a while. I probably shouldn't talk so much, but come on, you ask me a question like that and you don't expect me to have to dig into it a bit?
All right. So how about, do you believe life came out of non-life?
Well, yeah, I mean, the current understanding is that at some point there was no life in the universe. This applies regardless of your worldview. I mean, Christians believe this, atheists believe this, generally. I have met atheists who believe things like rocks are alive, like with minds and spirits and the whole deal. There's panpsychists who believe in some way that everything is alive. But okay, you and I probably agree that life came from non-life, through some means. There was at one point not life, and then there was. And now the question is, how can we figure out what those means are, and what kind of evidence is it going to take to establish that any given proposed mechanism actually works, and then that in fact was the mechanism at play? I have a really bad feeling that every one of your questions here is going to lead us down a really long and winding path right back to where we're standing.
How could something not living
Become alive?
create life?
Oh, I thought my version made more sense. Okay, hold on. How could something not living create life? I don't really see that the livingness or not livingness of the thing that created the life would have much to do with it, if that's what we're proposing happened. The much more important question to me seems to be, what is life, and can that be constructed of non-living materials? At least that's the first question to start with, right? Can non-living components be arranged and function in such a way as to become something that we would define as alive? The answer to that is yes, regardless of how that life originated. All life is made of non-life. Everything that makes up our bodies and the bodies of every single living thing is not alive. Life is made of non-life. Now, I know that doesn't address your question. I just wanted to point that out because I think that goes overlooked all too often. The fact that life and non-life are not distinct things, they're one and the same. Life is a bunch of processes of non-living chemical components. Okay, now back to you. Let's do your actual question.
How could something not living create life? It didn't have life in it. Where did it come from?
Okay, I really don't understand the question. How could something non-living create life? It didn't have life in it. What does it refer to? Are you talking about the components of life didn't have life in them to start with? Or are you talking about the non-living thing that created them didn't have life in it? And how would it change anything if it did? If some non-living process results in the non-living components of life arranging themselves into living organisms, or some living thing does the same exact thing, either way you have living organisms. It's not like life is breathed into life. It's not like you need a life donor. Life is a process that's happening. It's a thing matter and energy do. I mean, maybe you're talking about reproduction, you're talking about how modern complex organisms are the descendants of other organisms, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the origin of life. We're talking about the arrangement of atoms and molecules into the earliest, most primitive forms of life. And at that point, when the conversation is at the level of chemistry, I don't really see how it's useful to be talking about, well, chemistry doesn't have life in it, so it can't breathe life into non-living things. That's kind of a nonsense way to be viewing this. It's kind of like saying chemistry doesn't have breath in it, so how can the non-living molecules and atoms in your body cause you to breathe? That's breath from non-breath. It just doesn't make sense. For something to breathe, it has to be created by something else that breathes. Does it? Why? Can we delve into that? Why would something preceding life that results in life have to also share the properties of the life it precedes? Now, this as a question to start with is just not useful in any way. What's useful is to ask, can processes that likely occurred prior to the existence of life result in self-replicating molecules? And if you want a straight answer, I would say the answer to that is pretty definitively yes.
Like this pencil. It's not alive. How could this pencil create life? Think about that.
I have a headache all of a sudden. I'm not kidding. Did you seriously just say that to me? Okay, listen, Mr. Theist, common ground here. I know I might be going out of line here for the atheists in the audience, but listen, I will grant you, pencils don't create life. I know, I'm loath to admit it. It pretty much devastates my worldview. I mean, after all, go read Richard Dawkins. Go read any biology textbook. They all say the same thing. Life came from pencil. Oh, man. Tell me you have no idea what this conversation is about without telling me you have no idea what this conversation is about.
Or what about, you believe consciousness came out of something that didn't have any conscious? How so?
Well, consciousness is what your brain does, and your brain is made of stuff that's not conscious. So, like that, I guess. You believe this YouTube video came out of something that doesn't have YouTube video? Yes, it came out of a computer, which is a pile of metal and plastic undergoing certain processes. Shut it down, take it apart, you will find no YouTube video inside. I promise. How so?
This pencil doesn't have any consciousness. How could consciousness come out of it?
You're not joking, are you? You seriously believe that someone's going to say consciousness can come out of that pencil? It's a pencil. It doesn't have a brain. There's nothing in it that will produce consciousness. There's no process that could possibly run on it that would produce consciousness. Hell, it can't even evolve towards consciousness because it doesn't reproduce. It doesn't strive to survive. It doesn't need to perceive its environment. It's a fucking pencil. How can you possibly think this is a good analogy?
What about intelligence? Intelligence coming out of non-intelligence? Where do you see that happening?
Definitely not in this conversation.
This is insane.
No, it's just stupid. Look, do we need to have the whole evolution conversation? Like, do I seriously need to go remedial on this? I guess what I will say is that currently, right now, forget evolution, right now, there are organisms on this planet representing pretty much every stage of intelligence. Everything from single-celled organisms with only the most basic senses, if you can even call them that, all the way up to us, and basically every step in between. It's all pretty much still intact because representatives from groups with those different levels of intelligence and different levels of consciousness have survived. That shows you a pretty clear gradient from non-intelligence to intelligence that you can follow if you want to. And that general type of gradient is what you would see in the evolutionary history specifically of humanity, or any other intelligent species. None of this just pops out of nowhere for no reason, with no cause, no mechanism. A scientist who proposed something like that would be laughed out of the room because that's not science, that's religion. Science is not about proposing magic explanations, science is about proposing actual explanations that are not disproven by reality and explain how things work and how things got to be the way they are. That's what science is for. There are pretty good explanations that have been put forward in answer to this specific question of yours. They're all there for you to look at. Just go to Google Scholar, type in consciousness or whatever, and start reading. Type in the brain, type in intelligence, type in whatever you want. Right? The problem that you're having here is that you're trying to convert people by asking questions that show that you haven't even looked for answers. The rest of us are living in a world where these questions are slowly becoming answered. Many of them are answered to reasonable degrees of certainty. And meanwhile, you think we're living in a world where this is all just a big giant fucking mystery, where the history and development of life is as baffling as it was in the time of Jesus. I mean, look at the kind of arguments you're putting forward, man. Look what kind of stuff you think is going to knock our socks off. This is a pencil, and that can't become conscious just randomly for no reason, so therefore, naturalistic explanations for the origin of consciousness are impossible. Checkmate, atheist. Didn't see that one coming, did ya? Yeah, we saw that one coming thousands of years ago because it's an ancient argument. It was a bad argument then, and it's worse now. Update.
Or being aware. Awareness coming out of non-awareness. This pencil's not aware of anything.
Oh.
You know?
Yeah, I sure do. At least we're on the same page about that.
Or order. You believe order came out of disorder?
No, in fact, I believe the opposite if by disorder you mean entropy. Entropy is increasing, not decreasing. And it has been the whole time, just to be clear. Any local increase in order, that is decrease in entropy, is going to be compensated by a universal increase in entropy, decrease in order. That's thermodynamics. You seem to have a really funny idea of what a scientific view of the universe actually is. Like, everything came from nothing ex nihilo as if God had created it. No, that's not what they believe. That's what you believe. Consciousness can just randomly arise from any material, no matter what, regardless of conditions, regardless of composition, regardless of what processes are happening or not happening. That's obviously not true. And apparently entropy decreased to create life. No, definitely not. That's the exact opposite of the position of physicists. I think you need to brush up a little bit on what your opponents actually think, because up to this point you've got it all pretty much completely ass backwards.
How so?
Badly so.
The Big Bang? The explosion? Some atheists say it was an expansion, it's not an explosion. But the expansion was faster than the speed of light. That sounds like an explosion to me. I don't know, guys. Come on now.
Okay, well, come on now is not exactly a great argument in favor of using an inaccurate term. An explosion is an expansion of matter and release of energy within space-time, right? It's a rapid increase in volume. Volume is something that only makes sense within space. So when you're talking about the expansion of space-time itself, you're not talking about an explosion. You're not talking about something within space-time expanding in volume in space. You're talking about space expanding. That's not an explosion. I mean, if you want to use colloquial language, it's not that bad if you use that term, but it's not accurate and it doesn't help with understanding. In fact, it confuses the issue. It characterizes the expansion of the universe as being in some way like the expansion of, for example, TNT when you light the fuse, but it's not. These are very, very different things, completely different conceptually. This is why people have objections to the use of the term. It's because it makes people understand science less, and then they end up like you.
An explosion created everything.
No, not if it's an explosion, not if it's an expansion. The Big Bang is about expansion.
Really?
No.
And this explosion, they say, came from a dot that was as big as an atom.
Oh, really? I thought it came from nothing. Do you want to take a second, just go away and figure out what you think it is we think? Because right now you seem to be changing your mind on a whim. You know what, here's what I'll do. I'll give you a week to think about it. I'll come back and we can finish this later. And hopefully you have a bit clearer idea what it is you want to say. So, thank you all for watching this first part. I'm going to come back for more of this because this is amazing. At least I think so. I did not expect to have such a wonderful time with this one, but here we are. So before you go, please give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. If you really like the channel, please do consider supporting it on Patreon, Subscribestar, PayPal, whatever you like, just like all these wonderful people on the screen. For early access, sign up to the email list at list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.